Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Natural Portraits. A few weeks ago, we tested on the channel one of the latest releases from OM System, specifically for macro photography, the combination of the OM System OM1 Mark II and the M.Zuiko 90mm f/3.5 macro. As we saw, it's one of the best combinations on the market for macro photography right now, a setup that allows us to achieve up to 2 times magnification and even perform focus stacking directly in camera. This time, we're going to try out another major new release from OM System, which is this new M.Zuiko 50-200 f2.8. At first glance, it might not seem like a particularly groundbreaking lens, but I can assure you that this is the only lens on the market that offers these features, considering we're working with a micro four thirds system that gives us a 2 times crop factor. This means we're actually working with a focal length equivalent to a 100 to 400 mm f2.8. Do you know of any 100 to 400 mm f2.8 lenses on the market? Well, that's exactly what we're going to test in this session, both in macro photography and whatever else comes up. Let's get started. Well, right here next to the car, I have the first macro scene of the session. It's important to note that this M.Zuiko 50-200 f2.8 that I have attached to the OM1 Mark II is not a true macro lens. It's not a lens that naturally allows us to achieve a 1 times macro magnification. On its own, it allows us to reach a magnification of 0.5 times or 1 to 2, meaning we only get halfway to true macro magnification. So, everything we're going to do in this session will be close-up macro photography. However, as we will see, one of the greatest strengths of this lens is precisely its aperture, f2.8, which will allow us to achieve truly spectacular background blur in this type of image when shooting wide open. That's something we won't be able to achieve with any other lens on the market with these characteristics with an equivalent focal length of 100 to 400 millimeters. Additionally, the minimum focusing distance of this lens is 78 centimeters, which is truly a super comfortable distance for working with this type of photography. In fact, I usually shoot these photos handheld. I tend to work with the camera without a tripod, but as you can see here, I've set up the tripod because I want to take things a bit more slowly. I want to compose the photograph well, I want to frame it perfectly, and get a good shot, taking advantage of those 78 centimeters that the minimum focusing distance allows me. However, although this lens by itself won't allow us to reach that 1:1 magnification, we can actually attach an extender, which can be purchased separately for the lens, that will let us achieve a 1 times magnification. In other words, we can turn this lens into a macro lens. And here you can more or less see the framing I have. We have that little branch with the snail, and notice all the elements around the frame are things that are either in front of or behind this shot. And look at the incredible background blur we can achieve. I've taken several interesting photos. Right now, the little snail has just hidden itself away, but here we can clearly see some of the detailed images I've successfully captured, and if we zoom in closely, we can see that the sharpness is absolutely stunning at maximum aperture. Here you can see what I was mentioning about the background blur. Right there we have some plants with a few drops of dew from the night. Right now, the warm sun is beautifully hitting them, so it's a really great time to try to capture and get those wonderful background blurs. And we can see how the whole frame feels with little sparkling bubbles in the background of our shot. We can also pick out some closer subjects here. I simply set the camera lens to precisely focus between 78 centimeters and a full 3 meters, so the focus does not aggressively hunt back and forth through the entire range. This allows me to effectively capture a much closer element and truly get that background full of sparkling, glistening droplets beautifully behind it. Well, right in front of me, I have a small mushroom. And the truth is that this time of year, autumn, in humid environments like the one I'm in right now, is the best time to photograph these little creatures of the forest. What's more, when they're surrounded, as in this case, by some vegetation and a series of dewdrops that still linger from the night since it's the early hours of the morning. And it's precisely in these environments where this type of lens, with magnifications of 0.5 times to 1.2 times, gives us those truly spectacular frames, since many times, for this type of photography, we won't even need to reach that true 1:1 magnification. In fact, for these kinds of shots, it might be better to step back a little from the subject and frame it well together with the environment it's in and capture that photograph. These are truly compositions where a lens like this, unique in the market with that f2.8 aperture, will allow us to capture images that are completely different from what other lenses can offer. Alright, we've already spent some time testing and talking about one of OM Systems' flagship products, which is this M.Zuiko 50-200 f2.8, a lens that, as we've seen in close-up macro photography, gives us superb images. However, within OM System, we can also find other lenses that are much more similar to what we see on the market from other brands, such as this OM System 100-400. In this case, we're talking about an aperture that ranges from EF/f5 to f6.3, and with this camera, with this micro 4/3 system, we're looking at an equivalent focal length of 200 to 800 millimeters. This lens also has a close-up photography function. It doesn't quite reach the 0.5 times magnification that the 50-200 gives us, but it does allow us to get closer to the subjects we're photographing at the maximum focal length, which would be 400 millimeters. Let's do a test with the same mushroom we photographed a little while ago. In this case, we're talking about a minimum focusing distance of 1.3 meters. Let's open the aperture all the way, which in this case, at 400 millimeters, would be f6.3. I'm setting the minimum focusing distance from 1.3 to 6 meters, and let's frame the shot. There it is, and we take the shot. Can you see the mushroom in that frame? Yes, it's right there. As you can see, we're talking about something completely different. Here, it's true that we're talking about a very long focal length, a 200 to 800 millimeter equivalent on full frame, which would give us a lens really aimed at wildlife photography or even action photography, sports photography, but it's something absolutely different from this. Even though in both cases we have that function, macro photography for close-ups, here we have a much shorter focal length, 200 millimeters, which allows us to get closer to the subject we're photographing, specifically to about 78 centimeters, roughly half the minimum focusing distance of the other lens. And in addition, the aperture is the real advantage of this lens, giving us those idyllic compositions with such beautiful background blur. Alright, focusing on the technical aspect, we're obviously talking about a professional-grade lens, one that belongs to the same range as the M.Zuiko 150-400 f4, which we've already tested on this channel. This lens, the 50-200 f2.8, cost €3,499, which, while it may seem high, isn't so much when compared to other lenses on the market that could be considered in the same range as this one, but for full-frame format. Lenses that would be priced above €5,000 or €6,000. And it's worth mentioning that none of them would reach that f2.8 aperture that this one offers. Therefore, we're talking about a lens that, for professional photographers, provides focal lengths equivalent to those already available on the market, but with an added bonus, an extra, that no other brand or model offers. That beautiful background blur we can achieve in photos thanks to this aperture. OM System has recently been very focused on the world of nature photography. This is a lens that can offer us a lot when it comes to photographing wildlife, and as we've seen in this video, for macro photography as well. But I also think it's an ideal lens for action photography and sports photography. where it gives us a focal length that we can find in other systems on the market, that 100 to 400, but with an aperture that no other system offers. As for the weight of this setup, we're really talking about a very, very lightweight kit. The camera and lens together are around 2 kilos. We're talking about the camera weighing around 600 grams, in this case the OM1 Mark II, and the lens weighing 1.25 kilograms with the tripod collar attached. A weight that we can further reduce by removing the collar, which can be taken off as easily as loosening it. This knob here, the screw, we just remove it. And that way, we're talking about just over a kilo for the lens, 1.025 kilos, and 600 grams for the camera. So really about 1.6 kilos in total. For a setup with these features, it's truly a very powerful kit for wildlife photography, nature photography, and action photography. So I have to say that after having tested several OM system kits, after trying them out in macro photography and nature photography in general, I think OM System is doing a very good job in developing their equipment. They know exactly what they want, they know exactly which audience they're targeting, and they're truly releasing top-tier equipment on the market. And on my part, that's all I have to mention. I hope you enjoyed this video, that you learned something, and if you want to leave a comment or have any questions about anything I've said, you can let me know down below in the comments section. We'll see each other again next week with what we love most, photography and nature, here on Natural Portraits. Goodbye.